I have been with my husband for 6 years. We have one son, a toddler. When I was pregnant and for the past year or so, I've been feeling like I made an awful mistake getting into a serious relationship so young. Don't get me wrong, I love the kid. Being a mom is the best thing in the world, and I'd do it over and over again. That being said, at this point in my life, I would rather be doing it alone. I say alone because I have a lot of family and a lot of support. Now, my husband is not a bad dad. He's a bad partner. He is more than capable and more than achieving being a good dad. When we got together, it what now feels like an insane blur. No, seriously. Like 2 months later, we were living together. It was the best and craziest thing I'd ever done. I was insanely spoiled, practically worshipped, and really, really happy. Looking back, I cannot believe how rushed everything was. I mean, he was literally what you see in movies about true love. Yeah, what a load of crap. Everything was great until we got married. No surprise. Now it's 0 dates, 0 affection, 0 time spent together genuinely, 0 interest on my part at least. What the heck? I mean, literally everyone told us how amazing we were together, and now I'm thinking like, really? Now he won't take me out, doesn't spend any time trying to do nice things for me. He considers paying bills to be a nice thing, and more than enough. When I bring up that's very standard, he gets all mopey about it. He doesn't do any of the stuff I like, talks me into doing things sexually I do not like, and have been very clear about not wanting to do them. He is an awful manipulator in that way. We get a new vehicle? Oh yeah, you're definitely doing this tonight, or plan a trip or go shopping. Let me do that, after I've said no, literally more times than I can count, after he preached about how you don't trade intimacy for items or affection. Yeah, right, dude. It has gotten to the point over the past year that instead of spending my time at home with the kid, like we originally planned, I got a job so I wouldn't be coerced into doing things I don't like because I got something expensive. Then he goes and tells everyone in his family and mine how spoiled I am. It's super off-putting. I generally have the ick for that reason, and many others. I have my own car that's been breaking down for weeks. And it's always, I'll take care of it. $6,000 over an oil change. I'll take it this week, that was a month ago. He has a very short work week and manages to not get anything productive done. He hates leaving the house. He complains about being out all the time, but knows from the moment we got together that I can't sit inside all week. I have the kid on the nights he works, obviously, and my car doesn't work reliably. You'd think there'd be some urgency about getting your wife a working vehicle in case there's an emergency with your son. Yes, he takes the new one with him to sit in the parking lot of his job for the whole night. He's forgetful, can't remember to check my car, take it to get an oil change, can't remember when I work and when I don't, can't remember what I ask him to do or talk to him about, can't remember to do the things I have brought up to him, such as these issues. I am not perfect. I know I'm not. I'm not 100% innocent. I have no interest in him and pretend to so my life is easier. I pretend to be all right for our son. I know he deep down doesn't trust my judgment or think I'm capable of anything. But here's my dilemma. A, this is the roommate phase other couples talk about after having kids. B, I am still hormonal from birth and overreacting, something that could mess with my son's life. C, I am being immature and expecting too much. Or, is my slow little frontal lobe finally getting that getting into a serious relationship with an older guy was seriously a mistake? Either way, the issue is my lack of interest and his lack of attention. I am at the point that when I heard a text tone that was different go off on his phone, I considered him cheating and didn't even care. He wants therapy and I don't. So, should I be at the club? Just kidding. Here are my options. 1. Divorce and co-parent soon. Although he is the type to openly admit that if he had to pay child support, he would work the most minimum paying job he could as to not owe more money. Yeah, seriously. He said that when I was 7 months pregnant with our son. 2. Wait it out. Attend therapy and see if it helps us. 3. Leave after I get my bachelor's degree, dropped out during Infection 19, and hang around until I'm secure. Both leaving options come with me having a lot of family support, and I have a little bit of money. Not a lot, but I'd sell everything I could for a baseline, as I could live with family for free. Please tell me what you think. I'm open to criticism and advice. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. If it were me, I would choose number 1. If you have the support and you can leave, do it. As for him taking a low-paying job to avoid paying child support, he probably won't. Even if he does, judges are wise to that trick, and they will mandate child support calculated from his income before intentionally making less money. It is a common tactic that deadbeats try. It was probably a lie to manipulate you anyway. Leave, get your degree, get therapy, live your life. You have put up with the nonsense for too long. Comment 2. The longer you stay, the more hurt you will get. Your husband is not a good partner, and by the sound of it, never will be. So option 1 is best. Let him co-parent and pay you. If he is foolish enough to take a low-paying job, he will make his own life worse. And there is a high chance the judge will realize his plan and still demand he pays more. Another one of your husband's manipulative tricks to make you stay. Now, for the update. A week after my last post, I had finally made a decision about my relationship. I thought about it a lot, and honestly, I was just tired of feeling like this. I chose to confront my husband about how I felt over dinner at our favorite Italian restaurant. We used to go there all the time, and I thought it might remind him of when we actually enjoyed each other's company. Spoiler alert, it didn't. We had just finished our meals when I brought up the lack of romance and connection. He seemed surprised and defensive, insisting that providing financially was enough. I get it, money is important, but so is emotional support. Dude, I pointed out how I felt unseen and unheard, which led to him rolling his eyes like I was some drama queen. I mean, I was just asking for him to actually listen to me for once. In the middle of our conversation, he got a call from his coworker, which he answered. So professional of him, right? After he hung up, I was just frustrated and decided to leave the table. I didn't want to be around someone who clearly didn't care about my feelings. He followed me outside, and we continued the discussion in the parking lot. It was like a scene from a bad rom-com, where the couple fights in front of a bunch of strangers. I told him I needed space to think about our future and suggested a trial separation. He reacted angrily, claiming I was overreacting and that we could fix things. Yeah, sure, let's fix it with duct tape and a prayer. The next day, I packed a bag for myself and our son and went to stay with my parents. My husband texted me, asking if I was serious about the separation. I mean, did he really think I was joking? My parents were supportive, encouraging me to focus on my needs for a change. They were like my personal cheerleaders, and it felt good to have that. A few days later, I took our son to a local park, seeking some normalcy. I thought maybe some swings and slides would make us feel better. While there, I ran into an old friend who mentioned she had seen my husband out with someone else. My heart sank. It felt like someone punched me in the gut. I decided to check social media and found my husband's profile had new photos. He was tagged in a picture with a woman at the same restaurant we used to love. I couldn't believe it. I reached out to my husband, asking to meet up to discuss everything in person. We met at a cafe near my parents' house. I felt like I was going to explode. I confronted him about the photos and the rumors circulating. He denied anything was happening, claiming it was just a work event. Just a work event? Really? I told him I wanted a divorce, which he tried to negotiate against. He insisted we could still fix things and should go to couples therapy. I stood my ground, stating I was done being treated like an option. Over the next few days, I focused on myself, enrolling in courses to finish my degree. I felt like I was taking control of my life for the first time in years. My husband texted me regularly, trying to change my mind. He was persistent, I'll give him that. My parents helped me with childcare while I worked on my studies. They were amazing, giving me the space I needed to figure things out. A week later, I received a call from my husband, asking to meet one last time. I agreed, but made it clear that I wouldn't entertain any more negotiations. During our meeting, he confessed he had been seeing someone else for months. I felt like my world was crashing down again, but at least I wasn't surprised. I told him I was ready to move forward with the divorce without any further discussions. He reluctantly agreed, and we discussed co-parenting arrangements. It was like the final nail in the coffin, but at least it was done. To answer a few questions, we had been discussing a trial separation for a while. The relationship was already rocky. The photos confirmed my suspicions about his infidelity. Am I the idiot for cutting off my entitled parents after they turned our generosity into a financial nightmare? So shortly after my wife and I had our first child a few years ago, we came up with an idea to get my parents to move closer to us, since they used to live across the country. My wife had been wanting to figure out a way to get a second house, since we have 2 children now, and she really wanted to have 2 houses to leave them. Also, her family is Asian, and they are big on owning property and investing in property, and I think she wanted to continue that. Anyway, we came up with a plan that made sense to us at the time, and seemed to take care of a lot of things at once. We would buy a second house not too far from our current house, and rent it out to my parents, since we could not afford to just give them a house. They would rent out their current house, and pass on that rent to us to cover most of the mortgage on the new house. This seemed like a win-win. They get to move closer to us and their grandkids, and get a new house in a much better city, in my opinion. They also end up much closer to my sister as well. They essentially would spend $0 to do this. We would get a second property for our children. We would have them around to help with the kids sometimes, and we would be much more able to help them as they age. We also get tenants that are reliable and consistent and don't have to worry about renting to strangers. In many ways, this has worked out because it's great seeing my children have such a good relationship with their grandparents that they never would have otherwise. Unfortunately, we have quickly learned why people say not to get into business dealings with family. Basically, my parents and this new house have turned into a colossal money pit that we cannot escape from, and I also think my wife had unrealistic expectations of how this would work out. We agreed to do some work on the new house before they moved in, but that somehow has turned into a full remodel of the house, which we are paying for. They act like homeowners when it comes to deciding what to do with the house, and then they act like tenants when it comes time to pay for things. Now we have spent several tens of thousands of dollars on their house, which is sitting unfinished because we basically had to shut off the money valve so we wouldn't go broke. Instead of passing on all of the rent from their old house to us, they are only paying a fraction and using the rest to cover their property taxes, maintenance on their house, and to have an income. So we are just barely able to pay the mortgage. Additionally, they had to do repairs on their house before it could be rented, which they also expect us to pay for. And by us, I mean my wife's parents, who are funding all of this. The biggest sticking point currently that I'm having trouble resolving is who should pay for their old house. They think it's fair that they use the rent money to cover taxes and repairs and pay us the remainder, and that we should pay them back for the work they did on their old house before they moved, because they moved to help us. My wife thinks that it's not fair that we have to pay for repairs and taxes for a house that we do not own. On top of this, I'm not sure my parents can afford to pay for the repairs and taxes for their house, but they would have had to pay for all of that whether they moved or not. We can't afford to pay them either on top of what we are paying for our house and their new house. Currently, I am in the middle trying to negotiate, but I don't know who is right and what is fair. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Write the numbers out. Every fix, your mortgage, your insurance, and property taxes, you just blew through tens of thousands of dollars that could have been slowly accruing decent interest in a high-yield account for your children. Then let them see the figures and explain it's an unsustainable financial burden and you need to sell the house. Prepare for a falling out. Never enter into these kinds of situations with family, but if you are, write out a contract beforehand that details both parties' responsibilities, financial and otherwise. Going in blind was the first mistake. Comment 2. 2 sets of couples don't have the funds to pay for 3 houses. One of the houses needs to be sold. Wanting to leave 1 house per child is a kind of odd thing to want and an even odder thing to execute, especially given the convoluted plan to try to make it happen. And it doesn't make sense financially speaking because houses are money pits no matter who lives in them. As is, the situation is untenable. You need to sit down with your parents and make sure both sides are being heard because it sounds like there were miscommunications from the start. Now for the update. It's been just over 2 days since my last post, and the situation with my parents has continued to escalate. It all started with a phone call from my mom while I was at work. She was mad about the state of the renovations, saying they were taking too long. I reminded her that I was paying for the remodel and that it was a bigger project than expected. And then, like she's been doing lately, she hung up on me mid-sentence. Classic move lately. So, Olivia suggested we have a family dinner to talk about everything in person. We decided on my parents' house for the dinner, hoping it would ease the strain. Honestly, I didn't think anything could help at this point, but here we were, trying to keep the peace. On the evening of the dinner, my parents acted like everything was completely normal. It was honestly kind of creepy. My dad grilled burgers while my mom set the table, both pretending there were no issues. I mean, come on. My kid is in the kitchen and you're acting like I didn't just tell you something huge a few days ago. During dinner, I brought up the rent situation and the ongoing repairs. My dad interrupted, insisting we should be grateful they were even living there. Like, excuse me? Grateful for what? I pointed out that they were not paying their fair share of the rent, not even close. My mom accused me of being ungrateful, which led to a heated argument. I was so over the gaslighting. Olivia tried to mediate, but my parents dismissed her as if she had no say. I went back inside, unable to hold my anger anymore. I confronted them about their conversation, demanding honesty. My dad denied saying anything, and my mom backed him up. Total denial. I told them that I would stop funding the renovations immediately unless they agreed to pay up. They laughed, thinking I wouldn't follow through. Well, joke's on them. The next day, I started looking for a property management service. I decided to rent out the house to someone else and give my parents notice. I sent them a text message informing them of my decision. My mom called me, furious, demanding to know what I was thinking. She was all like, "How could you do this?" They threatened to report me to the authorities for evicting them. I reminded them that it was my property and that they had no legal claim. So ridiculous. My parents showed up at my doorstep later that week, uninvited. They tried to convince me to reconsider, but I stood firm. My dad mentioned that they had been planning to include my sister as a co-signer on the lease. I told them that if they wanted a co-signer, they should be prepared to actually pay rent. My mom was all about the family discount before. The conversation ended with my parents storming off, shouting insults. You know, classic family bonding. I got a call from my sister, asking what was going on. She seemed surprised to hear what had happened so far, saying that our parents hadn't mentioned any of this to her. Of course not. I explained everything in detail, and she seemed shocked by our parents' actions. She said she would talk to them and see if she could convince them to pay me back. I told her not to hold her breath. The next day, I finalized the paperwork for a new tenant. They found out about the new tenant before I could tell them. My mom showed up at my workplace, demanding to speak with me. I calmly told her I had made my decision, and there was no going back. She was furious, saying I was making a huge mistake. At this point, I don't care. Edit. My sister called later, apologizing for our parents' behavior. She said she would help them adjust to the new tenant and offered to help with costs. The new tenant seems nice, and my wife and I are relieved. My parents are still angry, but I'm focused on my family for now. Am I the idiot for wanting a marriage while my partner thinks it's outdated and unnecessary? Basics. I am a 38-year-old female and my partner is a 39-year-old male. We have been together for about 8 years. We have 2 children. One is 4 years old and the other is 11 years old. 2 years ago, he told me he would never marry. I am still struggling with this inside and sometimes feel very sad about it. Why? It was a shock to me. When we got together, he painted quite a pretty picture about the proposal he felt I deserved, even mentioning a location. Now okay, I should have chased this up with, "So you want to marry me?" But I didn't. I still feel justified in assuming that conversation meant he wasn't against marriage at least. His reasons. Marriage is outdated. It's archaic. There is no point to it. He is totally against the institution of marriage. Everyone gets divorced. These are direct quotes. My reasons for: I love him very much. I want to call him my husband and be his wife. I want a solidified union of family. I want us all to have the same name. Romantically, I want him to choose me in that recognized way. There are practical reasons as well, but we've solved some of these as far as possible with a will, at my insistence, since finding this out. We jointly own our home. I have offered a civil partnership instead. No. A humanist ceremony. He is against religion. No. I asked if we could get rings as a sign of our own personal commitment to one another and say a few private words, just the two of us in the garden, and put them on our wedding fingers. No. He will wear a ring, on the other hand, with no words between us. So that's what we both do. I wore mine on my left hand, but eventually felt quite ridiculous as he won't, so I switched it to my right hand like him. We had a big discussion about it, and I said, "Would you be willing to lose me over this?" He responded that I would be choosing to throw everything away, so yes. So to the question, I do not want to leave. I love him very much. I have no interest in or ability to change his mind. How do I manage my sadness about this? This discussion was 2 years ago, and I can't reach acceptance within myself, and I really want to. I truly want to accept this and be fine with it. Help. How? I can't afford therapy. To add, just to answer some common questions that have arisen, I fully believe he has the right to not want to marry. I am finding it hard to find my own peace, though. I am not interested in a party, dress, or big ceremony. I have suggested many compromises. Also, the eldest child is not his. I have been married once and divorced young. My youngest will be 5 years old soon, so we had him about 3 years into the relationship. I am the biggest earner. I co-own the house fully. We have made wills to try to protect us legally without marriage. But in this country, you can't replicate the protections of marriage. There is no common law type deal. Thank you. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. For what it's worth, I was with a guy for over 20 years who wouldn't marry me. I tried to accept it. I did therapy. I knew I didn't want to raise kids with a man I wasn't married to. I didn't want to have a daughter and teach her, through my actions, that I wasn't good enough to marry, or that I settled for a relationship that wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want her to see that and settle too, because that is just what women do. Nope. I finally left in my 40s after 20 years together, over marriage and children. Which sounds stupid. Should have thought of that 15 years ago, right? Well, better late than never. I put my needs ahead of his, and I have zero regrets. Also, the house was in my name, and I got a giant promotion, making life-changing money right after we split. No, I didn't know beforehand. He came back 2 years later, offering marriage and children, now that it would benefit him. Ah, no. You had your chance, you blew it. Have fun with that. See ya. Comment 2. You need to get a family law attorney. You need to learn your rights as a parent, as an unmarried woman. You have no marital assets. If he decides to bail on the relationship, you have no rights to anything you have built together. This is a bad position to be in. You need to learn what you would be able to receive in child support and make a plan. If he wants 50-50 custody, if you make more, you may be paying him child support. This man has children with you, yet wears no ring. You have no idea what picture he is portraying to the outside world. He could bail on the relationship whenever he wants and owe you nothing. I would get yourself in a position to move aggressively should you find out he's been having emotional or physical affairs, and in a position to retain your rights as a parent should he leave this relationship. Be wise, not emotional. He's not thinking like you do. Don't assume he is. Now, for the update. Just under a week after my last post, I decided to have a family dinner to talk about our situation more openly. I invited my partner and my parents, hoping their presence might help ease the tension. I made a simple meal, focusing on the kids to keep things light. During dinner, I casually brought up the topic of marriage again, wanting to see what my partner thought. My dad, not knowing about the underlying issues, joked about my partner needing to step up his game. My partner's reaction was immediate. He slammed his fork down and shot a glare at my dad. The kids paused, sensing the change in mood. and I quickly tried to change the subject. My partner muttered something about how marriage is just a piece of paper, which set my dad off. My dad started explaining how marriage can provide stability and security for families. My partner interrupted, saying that our current setup works just fine. The tension escalated, and I felt the need to step in before it got worse. I suggested we take a break from the topic for the evening, but my partner wasn't having it. He stood up, stormed out of the dining room, and slammed the door behind him. I followed him outside to try and talk, but he accused me of ganging up on him. I went back to the kitchen, finding my parents visibly uncomfortable. My mom tried to lighten the mood by asking the kids about their school projects. I sensed my partner was still mad, so I decided to let him cool off. The next morning, he didn't speak to me at all, which felt heavy in the air. I took the kids to a local playground, hoping to distract them from the tension at home. While at the playground, I got a text from my partner saying he needed space. A few hours later, he called, asking if I could meet him at a nearby coffee shop. I agreed, hoping we could have a calm conversation away from the house. When I arrived, I found him sitting alone, looking distant. He started by saying he felt trapped and that I was always pushing for something he didn't want. I explained that I just wanted some acknowledgement for our family, but he didn't budge. He mentioned feeling suffocated by the pressure of my expectations, which surprised me. I realized we were talking in circles, with no resolution in sight. I decided to suggest taking a break from our relationship to reevaluate things. He was taken aback and said it felt extreme, but he didn't argue. After a few moments of silence, he agreed it might be a good idea for both of us. We left the coffee shop without a clear plan. I spent the next few days focusing on my kids and their routines without him. I noticed a change in my children's behavior. They seemed more relaxed without the tension. I reached out to my parents, who were supportive, but concerned about the future. My partner texted me asking if we could talk again, but I didn't respond right away. Eventually, I decided it was time for a definitive conversation about our future. I set up a meeting at a local diner for the following weekend to discuss everything head-on. The stakes felt higher than ever, knowing that this conversation could change everything. Edit. The conversation at the diner led to my partner deciding to move out for the time being. We are still living together for the kids' sake and have agreed to remain partners in parenting. However, we are no longer intimate, and he has his own space now. We are communicating about the kids and have shared custody. Financially, we are still sharing expenses for the household. Our relationship is currently on hold, and we are both taking time to reevaluate our lives and what we want moving forward. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.